And it's just like a perceptual illusion. Once we're able to see the two faces as opposed to the vase, we can more quickly see that again. And that's something which, in terms of accessing this shift in perspective, really helps.
In fact, that is exactly what meditation means, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, which you and I are, have practiced for many years. The word meditation means to grow familiar with or to get to know something. So in one sense, you could say it's about getting to know yourself, getting to know your mind. But actually, what it really means is you're growing familiar with the view. You're basically doing exactly what you just said. It's like we have our contracted mindset and you're just flipping it. And then it flips back. And then you're flipping it again and it stays a little longer and it flips back. And you're getting more and more habituated to and familiar with being in that mindset. So in a way, that's really what a formal meditation practice is about. Richie, when I first started meditating, I was really fixated on what happened in the 20 minutes when I sat down on the cushion and started to meditate. That was kind of what I thought of as where the real practice was happening. Looking back on it though, actually I don't think those 20 minutes were really the most meaningful thing in my practice at all. In fact, I would say it was not inconsequential, but there were other things that were happening in my life that were somehow surrounding the practice and the outcome of the practice that were leading to some really, really important changes in my life. And now, knowing much more about the world's meditative traditions and contemplative traditions, I can see that actually, although I was focused on that formal period of meditation, the most important and impactful parts of my practice were actually the shift in perspective that was happening. I was just viewing myself differently. I was viewing the world differently. I was certainly viewing my own inner landscape, my thoughts and emotions differently. My life was more meaningful. I felt more purpose. And also, there was this process of just bringing my practice, bringing this new perspective, bringing what was happening in my formal meditation out of my meditation and into the rest of my life. So one thing you've heard me talk about many times was the fact that I was working my way through college and delivering pizzas, and all that time just driving around Minneapolis delivering pizzas. Those were periods of practice. Like I was literally in my car for hours a day, and I would turn off the radio and just be aware of my surroundings, be aware of my body. That was probably better meditation training than those 20 minutes I spent. So maybe we could just talk about this because people tend to think of meditation as that formal period. And the meditative traditions would show that actually it's this combination of the shift in perspective, the formal practice, and also the daily life application. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. We can maybe just riff on this and see what science has to say, your own personal experience. But yeah, how has this played out in your life?
Yeah, I mean, first, in terms of personal experience, I very much share with you, Court, that insight, which is really so important. And the that shift in perspective has been, enormously impactful. And for me too, I would say that the shift in perspective is um, more important than any of the actual experiences while I've been meditating. And I too, I think at the beginning stages was under the impression that the experience when we're meditating is really what's important.
Yeah, it's
And
like, how focused are you in that 20 minutes? Were you distracted
yeah,
or not? And that's, I don't know, looking back, like, I don't, does that even matter? I mean, I don't even know that matters that much.
yeah, and just to fast forward, in 2017, I co-authored a book with my long friend and colleague and Dharma brother Danny Goleman, and the title of the book was called "Altered Traits," and it was a play on altered states. For many years, people have been talking about altered states of consciousness, and the idea during meditation that you have this altered state of consciousness. But the title of the book, Altered Traits, was really meant to point people to actually what we're really most interested in is not the altered state, but rather how the practice leads to a more enduring change in our everyday lives.
Yeah, we're like
And that's
changing the
what,
baseline of experience, not just having some peak experience, for 20
exactly.
minutes and then it's over.
Exactly. And that changing the baseline is what we mean by the altered trait. So, yeah, I think that that's really super important. And, I think as we'll talk, I'm sure in the next few minutes, there are some, I think some really intriguing um, scientific ways of viewing this.
I'm curious, do you remember the early days of your practice and like how your mindset, your perspective was changing? Like I know for me, I was so stressed out when I started to meditate. I was just kind of at the limit of what I felt like I could handle, maybe over the limit of what I felt like I could handle. So I was really anxious, was really restless. I couldn't sit still, and I just felt kind of agitated all the time. And I think the biggest shift for me was that the things about myself that I was running from suddenly became interesting to me. So, anxiety, for example, I was just exploring through just being aware, just very basic mindful awareness practices, bringing awareness into my body and just asking a simple question like, what even is anxiety? Not answering it with my thinking mind, but paying attention and seeing that, oh, actually, it's this kind of very interesting experience. And that was such a huge confidence booster for me. And it just changed my whole, it wasn't so much that I was a great meditator. I was nowhere near a great meditator. But suddenly everything opened up. It just experience, life, problems felt workable in a way they hadn't felt before. So there's many things that changed, but I'm curious how that was for you. Do you remember like
Yeah.
what shifted in your perspective in those early days?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the important shifts in the sort of course of my meditation practice was uh, when, in the earlier days when I was meditating, I would get really down on myself if my mind was wandering and distracted, um, and uh, I would feel badly if I had a quote bad meditation session. One of the things that has been just like a 180-degree shift for me is one of the things that Mingyur Rinpoche often emphasizes is, if you're distracted, you can simply be aware of your distraction, be aware of your mind wandering. If you're sleepy, you can be aware of your sleepiness. It doesn't matter. Um, uh, and uh, and that just completely changed everything.
Yeah.
It
That
really just
everything that
completely.
feels like it's an obstacle or a barrier to happiness and well-being, suddenly it's like, oh, no, that's just a support for your meditation practice. And then there's like no problems anymore. Every problem has now become a support for your practice. Like that was just, I didn't encounter that for a number of years after I
Yeah.
started meditating. But talk about a perspective shift. I mean, that one idea has radically changed my whole life.
Yeah, for me too, and it just makes everything really workable. I mean, to this point where it's like, okay, just bring it on. Anything is okay. Um, and uh, and that's kind of an amazing, an amazing thing to experience. And it's a kind of fearlessness. And And it really is this complete shift in perspective. And as we were talking earlier, one of the things I liken this to is many of you, I'm sure, have seen perceptual illusions where you one of the classic ones is an illusion that could be seen as a vase or seen as two
Yeah, the two
faces.
faces like facing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and you often get locked into one perspective, and it's hard to see the other. But once you see the other, it becomes much easier to see it again. And And what we're talking about, I think, is very similar to this. Once you see this kind of um, difference in perspective, it becomes more accessible, and you can just tune into it. And it's like a perceptual illusion where you see it one way, and then all of a sudden you can have this
Yeah.
shift.
It's just like it flips almost.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly, and that's just, enormously freeing, to be able to see it in that way.
That reminds me of the series that you and I did with Miguel Rinpoche a few months ago, where we did this whole series, and we were talking about all these different approaches and methods to work with inner experience. But the key thing actually is this perspective shift that you're talking about, Richie. And for me, one way to look at that is shifting from a what you might call a problem orientation, where if you look at your life, most of us, most of the time, we're relating to ourselves, to the world, to our relationships, to our jobs, to really everything through the lens of the stuff that's going wrong, and maybe how we can improve it. But we tend to see the stuff that feels off or wrong more easily. We tend to get stuck on it. We get fixated on it. And the shift with this is, as you and I have talked about many times, it's like the shift to what's right. What are the things that aren't broken, that never were broken, that don't need to be fixed? So, like you said, with distraction and awareness, we start to meditate and we think, oh, there I go again. My mind is just distracted again. And I mean, probably everybody in the history of meditation has felt that they were a failed meditator when they began, right? Like, because you just see the distraction. And so we pay attention to the distraction and we think, oh, okay, distraction's the problem. Now I'm going to meditate and it's going to help me fix my broken mind, which is so distracted and so messed up. The shift here, the big shift is not in a way towards less distraction. It's seeing that even in the midst of distraction, awareness is actually present. We're equally aware
Oh.
in a moment of distraction and in a moment when we are become notice the distraction. It's just simply that we're more or less attuned to awareness. Like if I tapped you on the shoulder in a moment of distraction and I said, "Hey, Richie, what's going on?" You would say, "Oh, I was just distracted." How would you know that? Because there's a thread of awareness present, right? Like like if that thread was not there, you could not answer that question. So it's really just orienting to the qualities we already have. And again, that's like this perceptual flip that happens away from seeing the problems to seeing that there's parts of ourselves that are always here. It's like the air we breathe. It's almost like they're so common, we just tune them out or screen them out. But it's such a huge
Yeah,
shift.
it is, and I think one of the, really interesting things is that once you make that shift, it becomes much less effortful because you're not fighting with your mind, and when it becomes less effortful, it allows curiosity to naturally arise. When we're struggling with our mind, it kind of suppresses curiosity because we're
Mm.
so invested
Yeah, like we're
in
powered by
trying to fix
judgment
something.
rather than
E
curiosity.
exactly, and so, and I think that, humans actually have a kind of innate curiosity instinct, but it often gets obscured by our effortful struggles, and when we can relax those, the natural inclination to be curious about our own minds can arise.
And there's such cool science in this. I mean, Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset is probably the most obvious example. But again, when it comes to meditation or doing these practices, it's easy to think it's like that, whatever happens in your formal meditation, how distracted or undistracted you were. But if you think about it from this perspective, it's really what is this new perspective that you're bringing online? And, Carol Dweck's work shows all this amazing impact that just having a different way of viewing yourself can have all these benefits. So, I mean,
And
we're
actually,
yeah,
the number of minutes you're meditating might not matter that much. And the research that you're referring to of Carol Dweck and her colleagues on growth mindset, interventions to help people develop a growth mindset often are incredibly brief. And again, they're about this shift in perspective.
And they have these
And
effects that are years later. It's actually crazy when you think about it, that you can have like these tiny interventions that are very short, and the effects are literally years later. Like that was mind blowing to me when I saw some of that research.
yeah, so that's a great example of how this kind of shift in perspective is really like this disjunctive change. It's just a shift almost an instantaneous shift in orientation, and we clearly need to practice that to be able to access it spontaneously, and that's where meditation really can help. But once we have a glimpse of it, it really helps us come back to it. And it's just like a perceptual illusion. Once we're able to see, the two faces as opposed to the vase, we can more quickly see that again. And that's something which, in terms of accessing this shift in perspective, really helps.
In fact, that is exactly what meditation means, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, which you and I are, have practiced for many years. The word meditation means to grow familiar with or to get to know something. So, in one sense, you could say it's about getting to know yourself, getting to know your mind. But actually, what it really means is you're growing familiar with the view. You're basically doing exactly what you just said. It's like we have our contracted mindset and you're just flipping it, and then it flips back, and then you're flipping it again, and it stays a little longer and it flips back. And you're getting more and more habituated to and familiar with being in that mindset. So in a way, that's really what a formal meditation practice is about. It's less about, how focused you are or the mechanics. The mechanics are more the how of it, but the what of it is shifting. It's shifting into this new mode of being. So that's maybe one way to look at the view or the mindset is, if you notice, for example, when you're doing your formal meditation, that, oh, I'm back in this problem mindset. I'm looking at my mind through the lens of perceived flaws and shortcomings. I'm trying to fix myself. I'm trying to improve myself. And here we're just shifting it into a mode of self-discovery and self-exploration. You're learning to bring something into focus that's already there versus fixing a perceived flaw. And that's this little switch. But because the momentum is oftentimes in the other direction, we just have a lot of habits and mental and emotional habits that pull us back. We need that period of practice. So the other part of it is then so there's the shift in perspective, there's the formal practice, which just helps us to kind of rewire our minds and probably our brains in the process. And then applying that for short moments many times throughout the day, which is equally important. It's not some huge, like massive, you know, heavy soul searching exercise. It can just be light and playful moments where you just remember that. Like right now we're talking, the fact that we're talking about this, I've had many of these moments where it's like, oh yeah, you can just notice all these things that we're used to doing it because we practice this stuff, but you train yourself to notice these things and it just becomes, as you said earlier, it becomes your baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to point out, just from the perspective of science in this area, is that this notion of view, which is so important in some of the meditative traditions that we're talking about, and clearly has been very significant in our own personal practice. There's virtually no research that's been done on the view. And so, again, to any budding scientists out there, I think that this is a very valuable and rich opportunity to explore an aspect of the meditative tradition that I think is really important.
Could you, is it too early to share a little tidbits of research from the Louisville study and the control group that we did
Yeah.
there? Because that was our first like toe in the water
Yeah.
of looking at this. I wonder if you could
Yeah,
share.
no, we can share this. Yeah, and in all honesty, this is a kind of serendipitous finding. We were not really the study was not designed to explicitly look at the impact of the view on changes, but that's what it ended up, at least in part, being. So we in doing meditation research, when we compare the impact of meditation in one group to another group, we want a control group. And we often use what we call a wait list control group, which is simply a group of people who are recruited in the same way from the same population, who are interested in meditation, interested in learning, but we tell them that they're in this group where they have to wait, say, 6 months. And then at the end of this 6 month period, we will teach them the meditation, and they form what we call a waitlist control group. The problem with a waitlist control group is that they know they're in a control group. They know that they're not being taught meditation, and that itself can have consequences. And so it's not an ideal control group. And so in the history of research in our center, we've devoted an enormous amount of time in many different contexts to creating rigorous control groups. And we can spend a lot of time on that, and I'll skip that for now, but that would be an interesting subject for a
Just
future Dharma Lab.
imagine creating a whole program that just mirrors the thing you want to study, just so you have this like rigorously matched control group. It's quite an effort.
Yeah, and to the point where, in a control group, you want the enthusiasm of the people who are teaching whatever the control practice is to have the same level of conviction that what they're teaching is equally beneficial for the participants' well-being. That is a tall order, but I can tell you we've gone to great lengths to do that. So just to fast forward to what Cort is referring to as the Louisville study, this is a study that we did in the Jefferson County Public School District, which is the public school district in Louisville, Kentucky, with educators and other school personnel. And we wanted to create a rigorous control group to compare to a group that we gave the Healthy Minds program to. And we gave them the foundation course, which we've talked about in previous episodes of Dharma Lab. It's a 28-day program, 4 weeks, where they allocate 1 week to each of the 4 pillars of well-being that is in the framework that we've developed: awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. Okay, so how did we create this control group? What we did is we created a version of the Healthy Minds program app that contained all of the didactic information, all of the sort of mini podcasts, the teachings about the benefits
I
of
mean, really,
this kind.
discussions like this. You imagine listening to a lot of conversations like this in this way.
Yeah, and you can think of this as a way to shift one's perspective. But we omitted all of the meditation instruction. So there was zero meditation, absolutely zero. But they received instead just the teachings about the view, about the benefits of this kind of practice, about the perspective. And that's all they received. And the amount of time that they were listening to the different elements of the Healthy Minds program were matched. So the people who got the full Healthy Minds program were engaged roughly the same number of minutes per day as the people in the control group. And to make a long story short, on most of the measures, not on all of them, but on most of the measures, the control group, this particular control group, we also had a
So,
waitlist
like the
control group.
view only group, in other words.
The view only group, yes, thank you, did really well and did comparably on many of the outcome measures to the group receiving the full program. So even though they were doing 0 minutes of meditation each day, they still showed quite a bit of benefit. And this is really the
And this
first
is
study that
a
we
month
know
of
of.
practice, as you said. So,
Month of practice, yeah. And it's the first study that we know of that actually demonstrates the significant benefits of the view. And we're able to say that because this, in technical lingo, this was a 3-arm randomized controlled trial. Participants were randomized to one of 3 conditions. One is the full Healthy Minds program with meditation. The other is the View, which is the Healthy Minds program with no meditation. And the third, which was really important in this study, is a waitlist control. So we were able to compare the View group to the waitlist control to show that that group actually showed significant benefit.
Yeah, this is so cool. I mean, from a meditative point of view, you have these really precise delineations. We're talking about the shift in perspective, which is the view, the mindset that we've talked about, the formal practice, which is the period that you dedicate, where you're setting aside whatever else you're doing, you're focused on practicing that. In this case, really practicing, embodying, and inhabiting the view. And then the third category, which is the degree to which you stay connected with that in your daily life, which can be just short moments where you remember that practice, where it could just simply remembering to reconnect with awareness, remembering to see the positive in yourself and other people. It could be any number of things, but these short moments of application in daily life. I would guess, we haven't studied this yet, but from a meditative point of view, I would guess that if you had to put your money on where would you see the biggest shift? And you imagine somebody who was meditating a lot, but their view had not shifted. In other words, they had their same old perspective. Maybe for most of us, just a lot of negativity and judgment towards ourselves and seeing the flaws in ourselves, but a lot of meditation. And you imagine somebody else who had maybe a very strong shift in perspective, but wasn't practicing that much. I would be shocked if the benefit wouldn't be much more on the second one. It would be, that shift in perspective is really the critical ingredient. And if you subtract that, meditation, I mean, it might have some benefit. I mean, it's certainly better than no meditation at all. But if the perspective isn't shifting, my guess is you really are, it's like you're just missing really the key ingredient. And of course, applying that in daily life just is going to speed up the process because you're just integrating it in a way that will make it deeper and more lasting benefits. I don't know. I'm guessing
Yeah,
you would agree with that.
I completely agree. Unfortunately, we don't really have the right kind of study to really speak from a scientific perspective about that at this point. But I would completely agree with your predictions.
Yeah, it's such important work. Well, this has been a fantastic discussion, Richie. This was completely off the cuff. So hopefully those of you listening enjoyed this. And maybe the encouragement is just to think about this in your own practice. And I would say, if there's anything to take from here, it's just to shift out of the problem, flawed, shortcoming, self-improvement mindset and just treat it like a gift you're giving yourself, you're giving other people, you're giving the world. Just see the goodness, see the wholeness, see the positive qualities that are all around us. We just so easily screen that out. So the world needs this. As we know, there's no shortage of negativity these days. So hopefully we can all do our part to send little ripples of this mindset out into the world. Any parting thoughts from you, Richie?
Well, one of the taglines that I often say with this kind of discussion is that it's actually easier than you think.
Mhm.
And so I would encourage all of you to simply try this in your daily life. Look at other people and smile, and in your mind just recognize that they share the same wish to be happy that you do and to be free of suffering, and just send them a little positive vibe. And it's really easy to do. So we look forward to hearing from all of you about your explorations.
Yeah, please share in the comments for if you're listening to this. Share how you practice this. Share your experience. If you give this a try, we'd really love to hear from you. So, thank you for taking time out of your day. We deeply appreciate you, the fact that you're taking time to tune in here, and we hope you benefit from this discussion. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Dharma Lab.